Okay, so now I know it may seem that I'm flip-flopping. I know it may seem like I'm flip-flopping, but I can assure you that that's not the case. I am just figuring out, or at least trying to figure out the dynamics of the different teams. Similar to what Lando Norris did in the previous video we checked out today. He was playing the Formula 1 2021 game for the first time, and he was trying to figure out, okay, this is how I don't finish first. I'm saying this is how I crash into someone. I'm saying this is how I don't do well in qualifying sessions. This is how I don't make this corner. Like what I'm saying? Similar to that type of behavior, we're trying to figure out the dynamics of how to predict a Formula 1 season. Like I'm saying, I picked Mercedes to gauge the trajectories there. Like, you know what I'm saying? I picked McLaren at the beginning of the season to sort of just understand that dynamic. And then I left them to understand, okay, so maybe it's not them. But it would seem McLaren is looking a little quick again. McLaren is looking a little quick again. So we're going to gauge that dynamic once again. And we are going to be hopping back into the McLaren bandwagon. Where did McLaren get their great speed? Because they've been looking pretty quick. Looking better than Mercedes, if I may say. They've been looking pretty quick as of late. In the previous race, the one that happened this last week and the one before, they've been looking pretty quick as of late. Lando Norris is up in the top 6, in the top 6 or top 7 in the championship contention. So we're creeping back in, and I will be hopping right back into that McLaren bandwagon to just gauge again the dynamics. So yeah, let's check it out. Why McLaren is fast again, starting now.
In Bahrain, McLaren were nowhere.
Yeah.
Level pace, a car that was apparently very, very difficult to drive, and a P14 and 15 for the two drivers.
Yeah.
And that would have been P18 and 19 if the 3 Red Bull engines had held together.
Yes,
but
sir.
they've had one hell of a resurgence, with Lando getting a podium in Imola and some
Podium.
strong results in Australia.
Podium, bro!
They changed. And where
Play
are they
with
going
me.
from here? Well, this story with the McLaren
Podium.
starts in Bahrain, where we were all wondering if the McLarens were going to be backmarkers for the 2022 season. They
Okay.
only beat Latifi and Hulk in a car that he'd never driven before, and
Yeah.
missed the Red Bulls and Gasly, who all DNF'd. If you look at qualifying, their delta to the fastest cars in that session was about 1.5 seconds. Then, looking at race pace, the delta was even bigger. Now, this is harder to tell in the race with traffic, degrading tyres, and the list goes on. But you can see that McLaren is consistently a way off the pace. Lando said, "We don't really have a good enough car to do better," and explained that he had to really push hard just to keep up at the beginning, only then to degrade the tyres and fall off the pack altogether. And this comes down to a number of factors. They were lacking downforce, so the tighter bits of the Bahrain circuit were a real issue for them. Then add on top of that, they are running the Mercedes engine that is thought to be a little bit way back on power. And so Bahrain was perfectly suited
Oh, so it's
to
Mercedes'
challenging their
fault.
car. Then in Saudi, the delta was cut back to 1 second from Charles to Lando. And yes, the track has fewer low-speed corners, which are thought to be McLaren's main challenge. The high-speed stuff really relies on having a lot of downforce. Then in Australia, where the Ferrari was really good, the delta was cut down to about 0.8 of a second. Great progress. They went from P18 and 19 to P5 and 6
That's what I'm
in
saying.
3 weeks.
It's
And
eat
to
up.
go over where this pace came from, we've got Scarbs, the man with more F1 components than the McLaren F1 team.
That's a radiator.
That is so cool. What's it from?
It's Williams 2014, and it's one of the 2 engine water radiators.
So they sit in the side pod.
Yeah, so that one would literally sit kind of right up next to the cockpit at the top, and then you'd have a bit more than the intercooler behind it, as I remember on that car.
That is
I was hoping to fit that to one of my minis. So when we came to Melbourne, McLaren were looking far more competitive. And this would be down to 2 things. First of all, they've had quite a few weeks now since that troublesome Bahrain race to work on the setup, to understand what's going on, to make all those little modifications to the car and to the setup. So I think that really has helped, and I think probably the lion's share of the improvement would be in those kinds of improvements. Melbourne is a very particular circuit, very front limited, and we've seen the competitiveness between various teams wax and wane over these first 4 races, which have kind of gone between front to rear limited circuits. I think that really is a factor there. But then as we move on, we can see that McLaren really have made some underlying performance improvements.
Then we came to Imola, a track with lots of tricky traction zones, tight corners, and a need for a lot of downforce. But here McLaren were really strong. And the reason was that the wet conditions really balanced things out. You can see that the delta got smaller again. And yes, we've only been comparing Lando's pace to others and not Daniel's. But Daniel has been a little bit further down the grid at the moment on the whole. And Lando's pace seems to be consistently closer to the ultimate pace of the car. So, sorry, Daniel.
McLaren looked the best of the rest by a small margin, really. You know, in a weekend where, you know, with wet conditions, you would expect some drivers just to put that performance in, and we certainly did see them up and down the grid. But certainly, you could see where McLaren was placed between Red Bull and Ferrari and the rest of the midfield. And this could come down to various things. I mean, I think first of all, these conditions tend to work better with a car that doesn't have as much downforce and as much power. So that really plays into some of the weaknesses that we know are in the McLaren package.
But whilst the ultimate pace hasn't been there, the McLaren does look to be a balanced car. Both Lando and Daniel were able to pull out great results in the sprint race, as well as being best of the rest in the race. Just quickly, don't forget I'm giving away $1,000 to one of our newsletter subscribers this week. So get signed up with the link in the description and do it quick.
But equally, when you then look at, you know, how the driver has to cope with those conditions, you know, very slippery, trying to get temperature into the tyres, and you've got all those fiddly corner sequences at Imola. That then brings into the fact that you've got to have a car that's balanced, the car that turns, that the driver is confident in and can throw around. I think really it's just a case that they've got a really well-balanced package. They haven't got all the performance in there yet. They don't have the problems with porpoising that much of the midfield seem to have through those bumps and dips through the old surface on the Imola circuit. So I think that really brought all of the advantages of the McLaren chassis and Mercedes power unit to the fore.
And it's really interesting how far McLaren have come, because they have done very little to develop the car so far.
Yep.
No real upgrades other than weight saving, which really stood out this weekend, because McLaren have stripped so much paint off that car. Loads of areas that used to be orange or blue, they're now just carbon.
There were no updates other than a revised gurney for the beam, which was aimed at just helping balance the car in higher downforce damp conditions, which clearly was a useful update to bring for that weekend.
That's good news.
Really
That's good news.
Good to look at on the McLarens.
And you may think that this is going to be a tiny game, as paint is such a thin layer on the car. But on this sort of scale, they can save up to about 500 grams, which isn't nothing.
I mean, weight actually outscores power or aerodynamics. If you can decrease weight, and certainly everyone seems to be over that minimum weight limit, the sooner you can get down to that minimum weight limit, the sooner you've got an advantage over your rivals.
So on the whole, it's not a bad car. They just need to get it in the right window, with downforce, ride height, and keeping the tyres in check. Now, we don't expect them to be fighting for podiums in Miami, but who knows? I am the king of foreshadowing at the moment. I actually said Leclerc knows how to take a curb, doesn't he? 2 days before, that same curb ruined his race. Anyway, you should watch this video about Ferrari's horrible race weekend in Imola. Please subscribe to Drive61, and thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you.
That is the end of the video. Let's not get it twisted now. We do expect them to be in contention for the podium. I know Red Bull and Ferrari combined for 4 spots, but we'll fit ourselves in the third for some way, somehow. We'll fit ourselves in third, second, or maybe even first, if I may. But yeah, I like what I'm hearing. They didn't really do anything crazy. They didn't have any crazy upgrades yet. And the car went from last, pretty much bottom of the grid, to now top, the best of the rest. So like with the upgrades, we're talking podiums. We gotta be talking podiums. I mean, other teams are gonna add upgrades as well, but I'm betting that McLaren's upgrades will be better again. And someone mentioned it to me. Someone mentioned it in the comments. Every time I pick a team, they always do bad. But this time is not going to be the case. We're back on McLaren's bandwagon. I left, and they did good, and we're coming back again. I started off on the bandwagon. They didn't do too good. I left. They did good. And we're back again. Hopefully this time, the upgrades come through for me. I don't want to be known as the bad luck guy. But if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.